Hey guys, Andre here, bringing you our Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon Q&A, where I'm going to answer some of the questions you sent in on our Facebook page, Twitter account, and on our YouTube videos, right here, right now. Now, I'm not using normal green screen, simply because I don't have time for it, so you're getting the raw version of the GameXplain right here. Also, I can't talk about everything in the game still. I can still only talk about the first two mansions, plus a little bit of the fourth one, and I'll be able to talk about a little bit more in a few days, once the review goes up on March 21st. And then I'll be able to talk about the full game when it actually comes out. So stay tuned for more coverage from that. For now though, let's get started with the questions. You guys had a bunch of good ones. So I picked the biggest ones, or the ones I thought you wanted to have most answered. And that's going to start with Becky on Facebook, who asks, when is the Q&A video coming? Well, Becky, in case you can't tell, it's coming to you live right here, right now. Well, more so live for me, less so for you. But I guess you are watching it live in your time, so. Now for actual questions, we have Yudin on Twitter who asks, hey Andre, how was the ghost catching? As a big fan of the original Luigi's Mansion, I was concerned about how the ghost catching would work, having only one control stick as opposed to two. Even though the original Luigi's Mansion allowed you to use only one control stick, I don't think anyone really played that way, or if they did, it didn't play as well as with two sticks. So it works really well in Dark Moon, surprisingly well in fact. The way it works now is it basically functions a little bit like the single stick in Luigi's Mansion, where you aim wherever Luigi walks now. So you can't strafe anymore or anything like that. But when it comes to, when you start vacuuming up a ghost or something, you basically lock onto that character and you can't turn or anything. So, it works well. I do miss a little bit of the freedom of being able to turn independently of where you're moving. Especially when you're using the dark light, because it is a little bit annoying that you have to basically turn it on and off in order to turn at all. So, if you want to aim around a room, it's going to require you to turn it on and off quite a few times. With that said, it works overall. You'll find out more about it in my full review. And yeah, it's fine. Stevie on Facebook asks, what are the Toad quests in the game? Do they serve as escort missions? What is their purpose? So yeah, the Toads, you're basically just rescuing them. And they usually have something for EGAT that he needs. Typically a picture, a three-dimensional picture that you can use to view something coming up in the game, or like a hint of something coming up in the game. And so the Toads are basically escort missions in that they follow you from room to room, and you don't really have to protect them though that much. I mean, they can get damaged. The only thing that happens is they'll start running around, as we showed in our preview video. They'll start running around like a chicken with their head cut off whenever they get scared or something, and then you have to go. Then once you clear out the room, you can go back and calm the Toad down by flashing him with your strobe light. I don't know how that helps exactly, but then he'll continue to follow you around. The main purpose of the Toads, though, is in terms of gameplay, is that you'll use them to solve puzzles. Now I can't really talk about any puzzles specifically because Nintendo doesn't want us to. But you'll come across various things in the game, obstacles that you'll have to work with a Toad to get past, and it all works really well. I thought the amount of Toads in the game is perfect for the length of the game. You never come across, you never feel like you're beholden to these Toads. You'll only encounter them in a few missions, and it's always, a nice change of pace whenever you do encounter them. So, yeah, that's all I would have to say until the review. Game Master Tricks on Twitter asks, how is the gyroscope used in the game? Does it require you to move the 3DS to capture ghosts? So the gyroscope is pretty much entirely optional for the game. What it primarily does is it allows you to move the camera around when you're aiming, or even when you're vacuuming ghosts. I believe you can tilt it up and down to direct Luigi up and down, but you can also use the face buttons for that. The only time that the camera is really required is when you're walking along these thin, like catwalks or something. You need to balance Luigi. You need to tilt it left or right to keep him in place, and it works well enough for that. And then you also use it for first-person aiming, which happens whenever you look through a window or a crack in the wall. You can see into another room. You can move the 3DS around, kind of like in Zelda, in the 3D version of Ocarina of Time, where you did the same thing when you're aiming. Now, there's no actual first-person mode in the game, like there was in the first one, where you use a Game Boy camera to scan things. This time, it's only when you really look into those other rooms, which is a nice, which is a cool little touch, and you never really needed the first-person view too much in the original game anyway, and it's not really missed. So, Janelle on Facebook asks, will there be bosses? Yeah, there is a boss at the end of every mansion. A main boss, and you will encounter, I think, just a few sub-bosses throughout, but it's mostly focused on the main one at the end of each mansion. They work pretty well, or they're pretty cool overall. I can only talk specifically again about, I think, even only the first boss, which is the spider at the end of Gloomy Mansion. And as I've mentioned before, that one is very puzzle-based, and it works really well. I actually got stuck on that for not too long, maybe 10 minutes or something, trying to remember how to do one particular thing, which I somehow forgot since the preview event where I fought the spider then too. So that's a sign, of a pretty puzzling game when I forget how to do something I've already done before. So yeah, there are bosses, at the end of each mansion, and there's 5 mansions, so you can probably infer the rest from there. Then Tyler Poe Action Hero expands on that question, not intentionally, I think, but and he asks from YouTube, are the bosses similar to the original Luigi's Mansion? Like, are the bosses designed to seem like former residents of the mansion, or are they just larger random ghosts? They are basically just larger, variations of the ghosts we've already seen. I mean, they're not the same ghosts, but they are similar. But they possess things, like the spider, for instance. So you're not directly fighting these ghosts because they're possessing other things or creatures that you fight, that you fight instead. It's basically an extension of the ghost. So you're not fighting former residents of the mansion like you did in original Luigi's Mansion. In fact, there are no portrait ghosts at all in this game, which I know will come as a disappointment to some of you, but I'll get more into that in our full review. I'll talk a little bit more about my thoughts on that. I can't really explore too much, but it's really not that big of an issue, I think. Oh hell yeah, 147 on YouTube asks, are there any new ghosts other than the ones we've seen in the trailers? You've probably seen most of them in the trailer. There really isn't a whole lot besides some of the bosses and a couple of, in fact, I think they might have shown pretty much everything in the trailers as far as basic enemy types are concerned. But again, it's not a huge issue. I'll again explore that more in our review. But they do a pretty good job, mixing it up with the current array of ghosts that it doesn't seem to be much of a problem, that you've seen most of what's coming up. James on Twitter asks, how is the frame rate now? I thought it was pretty bad in earlier builds. Yeah, it was pretty bad in some of the earlier builds. I remember playing at E3 and it would slow down a lot at certain points in the game. They fixed it up a lot though. It no longer slows down to those levels. The frame rate is still pretty inconsistent though. Like in that it'll vary from, it seems 60 frames per second at times, and it will just drop maybe down to 30, maybe a little bit lower than that at points. It's not much of an issue, but you will notice it's more that you'll notice it when it's like super smooth. It's like, oh wow, this is really this is running really well compared to how it normally runs, which again, it runs fine. It's just that it doesn't run as smooth as it does at other points in the game when there's not much going on. It just kind of stands out in comparison when we can see how well the game could run, and it doesn't. Jared on Facebook asks, are all of the ghosts of the more cartoony style like the ones in the trailer, or are there boss ghosts that are more humanoid like in the original? Well, I think I pretty much covered that already. We've already seen most of the ghosts. They're all more the cartoony style. There aren't really any humanoid ones at all. Besides as far as to the extent that the current ones look humanoid to some extent. Trinity 1998 asks on YouTube, how does saving work in the game? Are there save points within the mansions, or can you only save after a mansion is completed? So it saves after every level. So whenever you complete a level, it will save. There are no mid-mission savings or anything. So once you start a mission, you have to finish it. Otherwise, you're going to have to start over from the very beginning. And I'll get to more, there's probably a few questions you have right now regarding to that, or related to that, and I'll answer them coming up here. Raphael asks, does the game have a file select menu like the original one? It does have a file select menu. It's not quite like the original one, and that's not themed as well. It's very basic. Allows you to choose from 3 files. You can, start a file or delete a file. You can't copy a file, unfortunately. And I recently just did a cool bits on the original file select screen for Luigi's Mansion, and I loved how just atmospheric it was. How it basically gave the menus a personality, where it taunted you even in the menus. Like if you were going to delete a file, it'd be like, you can delete the file, but you can't delete the fear, which I thought was awesome. This game is lacking, doesn't have that same thing. It's not a big deal at all. It's just a cool touch in the original that didn't quite carry over. Damien on Twitter asks, if you haven't played the previous game in the series, would it be worth playing? Yeah, I mean, it doesn't depend at all on playing the original game, so absolutely. It's, again, I can't give you my full thoughts on the game now, but the fact that you didn't play the first one shouldn't be a barrier to playing this one. Jamie on Facebook asks, does each mansion feel lengthy enough to feel like you're not moving to each other quickly? He's asking, does it feel like is the pacing good, basically? And yeah, the pacing's fine. Each mission is anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour. It's usually somewhere in between, but it can vary, especially if you get stuck in a couple puzzles, like I did for a while. And yeah, each mansion is about 5 missions in total, or anywhere between like 4 to 6 missions. And so each mansion does have a pretty good length of time for it. Kurt Dog on YouTube asks, how big is each mansion in comparison to the mansion in the first game? So I would say, I'm just spitballing this, I would say each mansion is maybe about a third, a half of the size of the original mansion. You'll explore a decent amount of rooms in each one, but none of them compared to the size of the original Luigi's Mansion. But in aggregate, it dwarfs the size of the original Luigi's Mansion. And add to that the fact that each mansion has different missions, and in each one you'll be exploring different sections of the mansion. So even though they're not the same size of the original individually, you get more than enough mileage out of each one. Nintendo Nerdly asks, how long is the game? So according to my in-game counter, it was about 22 hours, but that's, I had the DS just sitting there for a while, or it was me repeating things for video, so that's not entirely accurate. I would say it's probably anywhere between 15 to 20 hours, playing through the full game. Now, I did take my time, I was looking for treasure all over the place. I still missed a bunch of things, but, the game does seem pretty lengthy, even though I'm sure you could rush through it at a much quicker pace if you're not, looking for everything. But I wouldn't advise that, because it is worth your time looking for things, and that's, part of the game. Rita on Twitter asks, hey, for Luigi's Mansion 2, is there tons of treasure like in the first one to be found? What do you do with it? So I basically covered this in my preview, but yeah, there's still a lot of treasure to find. You'll find it all over the place, just like in the first one. And you use it to cash it in for upgrades to your vacuum and equipment at the, between missions. Now, you don't really select what your upgrades are. You're basically just filling a meter whenever you reach a set point. Set out money, then EGAT gives you an upgrade in a set order. Usually something like an upgrade to your Poltergust, how powerful it is, or how you upgrade its, basically if you use a Poltergust when you're sucking up a ghost, you can charge it up and you can unleash a powerful attack, and there's different levels to that attack, and so that's what you'll level up. And then you can also increase the length of time that you use the Dark Light for, because normally whenever you use it, it drains a meter, and then in order to replenish it, you just stop using it for a few seconds. So you can use it a little bit longer before you have to recharge it. Ahmad on Facebook asks, how long are the mansions individually? I think I just answered that. Maybe they're a few hours each, and different mansions are of different lengths. But yeah, each mansion's, anywhere between maybe 2 to 4 hours. It really, depends on how you play and the exact mansion and, a few other factors. If Chilo 101 asks, do you complete the mansions one at a time in a set order, or can you go back and re-explore previous mansions? So you do complete them in a set order. You go from one mansion to the next. Once you finish all the missions in one mansion, you go on to the next one. Always in a set order. There's no room for switching it up at all. But you can replay previous missions to look for things you missed or to increase your rank in each one. Because you are ranked from 1 to 3 stars based on a few factors like the amount of treasure you found or how fast you completed the mission and how much damage you took. So it's worth replaying those to increase or rather, I don't know if it's worth replaying them, but I don't know if you get anything for increasing your rank, but if you're of the type who wants to increase your score, there is incentive to go back and look for those things. Zaiden on YouTube asks, do you select a mission from the mansion when you enter it? Do you select a mission from the mansion when you enter it, and does that change the mansion's interior design like it did in Super Mario 64? Well, I don't think Super Mario 64 really changed the levels that much. I guess it did a little bit, and that's the same thing here. It's more that you're exploring different aspects of the mansion than the mansion actually changes. But different things do happen in the mansion when you re-explore. There are differences in each mission, and things that you did in a previous mission that might have changed. For instance, in the first mansion, there's a point where you can lower the fish tank, which reveals a doorway, and that carries over to subsequent missions. And then you do select it just like in Mario 64, how you select a star at the start. Lee on Facebook asks, does the game have the same creepy music and sounds as the original? The game is still a little bit, creepy, but I would say it's lessened from the original. It's probably a little bit more, for lack of a better word, cartoony. Maybe a little bit more, family friendly now, even though the original is extremely family friendly. But it does, it's not quite as dark as the original Luigi's Mansion. It's a little bit more lighthearted, I think is a good way of putting it. And I think it works fine. Luigi still treats it as if it's just as creepy as the original. He freaks out all the time, which is hilarious. But yeah, overall, the game's not quite as dark or foreboding as the original. But it still does a really good job of walking that line between being whimsical and also being a dark, scary place. Bright Guy 13514 on YouTube asks, when the polar pup revives you, do you respawn where you fainted or start over? So as I mentioned in the preview, you can find golden dog bones around some of the missions, and then they only work within that mission, but they act as a continue basically. So if you run out of health, the polar pup will run up and lick your face, and then it reawakens Luigi, and you resume right from where you left off. So it's as if nothing happened at all. You come back with full health. You can pick up right where you left off, which is really convenient. So it's definitely worth looking around to find those golden dog bones. Otherwise, you're going to restart the entire mission if you die. Deshawn on Facebook asks, would there be any? Are there still any elemental powers in Dark Moon like in the first game? Technically, no. There are no elemental powers anymore, in that you can't really suck up fire or water or I forget what the third one was in that game, and you spray it elsewhere. Those are gone. But you still interact with fire and water. Just now that there are objects you'll use, as basically a middleman in order to take advantage of those powers. So, for instance, instead of like sucking fire directly, now you'll light something on fire, carry it around with you, and then use it to burn things. So, or you'll find a bucket to pick up water and then use that to splash on things. So it's still there in concept. It's just a little bit different in how it works. And finally, Victor on Twitter asks, when will the review come out? Well, Victor, I think as I mentioned earlier, is coming out on March 21st at 10 a.m. Pacific time. So keep an eye out for that. We'll go more in depth into our full thoughts on the game. We'll tell you how we think it stacks up to the original and how it stacks up to the 3DS lineup. And that about covers our Q&A for Dark Moon. Thank you for sending in your questions. If you have any more, post them in the comments and I'll try to answer what I can. Thanks for watching, and make sure to stay tuned to GameXplain.com for tons more on Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon coming up over the next week or two. Including our review, we'll have a whole guide going up for the game, and I'm sure a bunch of other features as well. So thanks for watching, and keep an eye on our website.